It's Overdose Awareness Week coming up in Oklahoma, and we've got two guests this morning to talk about that. Denise Roberts, Reggie Whitten, good to have you both.
Thank you.
All right, this is something that's in the news. You've worked on this for many, many years, and your families have been touched by overdose. Let's start with the event that's coming up August 31st at Scissortail. You've lost two children to the opioid scourge, and it's just so sad. People that see the news, they go, it's not going to touch us, but it has. It touches everybody. Can you share your story about, first of all, what's going to happen on August 31st, and second, how your family's been touched by this?
Sure. August 31st is International Overdose Awareness Day, and myself and another mom, Tammy Posey, we put together this event with the help of some sponsors such as Fate, and we bring other families together, other resources together, and it's a time that we use to recognize and honor those that have been lost through addiction. At the end of the event, we have a memory walk, and we get a chance to talk to other families, learn about each other's trials, tribulations, and also give them resources to help. I had two boys. They were both born on the exact same day, 4 years apart, on July 17th. And I lost my son Dylan when he was 19 years old to addiction. And then 6 years later, I lost my older son Matthew to the same thing.
Reggie, you're here today on behalf of Fate, fighting addiction through education. People know you were involved in the opioid lawsuits. You've had family. You've lost a son to this. What are the lessons in 2023, we've been seeing this for a long time, that we need to know about?
Yeah, well, I lost my son Brandon in 2002. And, I'm from Seminole, Oklahoma, ordinary background. I truly thought addicts were kind of like Otis the Town Drunk in Andy Griffith. I'm not proud of that, but that's really what I thought. I just was poorly educated on it. And surveys show, even today, that's what a lot of people think. They think this is bad people doing bad things to themselves. But that's not true. It is a disease of the brain. It's no different than diabetes, asthma, cancer. It is a medically recognized disease. Now, does it start out sometimes with behavior that is, we're not necessarily proud of? My son was drinking and taking a pill, a prescription pill that someone gave him. He wasn't sick. He didn't have a prescription. And that's a mistake. But how many of us have had a glass of wine over dinner, not knowing that it could end up hurting us later? And that's what happened to him. Brandon got addicted to taking prescription painkillers, and I learned the hard way, watching him suffer for 3 years. He couldn't break that cycle of addiction. Now, what I know today is different than what I knew then. I know now that when you take substances, like it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, opioids, whatever, it changes the chemistry of the brain. I'm not speculating. This is science. The same science that we use every day. iPhones work for a reason. It's science-based. We all believe in that. GPS, it's science. We now have devices that can look into your brain. We can see the chemistry of the brain and how the blood flow changes. It's not speculative. And the chemistry of my son's brain changed. There's something in the brain called the reward center. And opioids and other drugs hijack that reward center, and they hijack it with a vengeance. It's the same part of the brain that tells us, we need to eat a cheeseburger because we're hungry. We need to drink water because we're thirsty. But it hijacks it with a vengeance, and it lies to you, and it tells you, you have to have more drugs. It's more important than feeding your children. It's more important than anything. And it will ruin your life and take over. And sadly, it can kill you. As Denise and I both learned, she lost 2 sons. I lost 1 son to this disease. Now, here's the other thing. The stigma that's associated with this disease of the brain, it's unlike any other disease. If you get cancer, or your loved one gets cancer, or some other disease, Oklahomans are so loving and caring. Your neighbors will come over. They'll bring food to the house. They'll give you a warm embrace, and they'll give you support. And that's so helpful. But when your son or daughter or loved one gets sick with addiction, it's a totally different deal. Nobody's coming over. Nobody even talks about it. It's like a black mark of shame. And that stigma of shame keeps people from getting help. It keeps our leaders from changing the laws and treating this like a disease instead of just bad people doing bad things. And that's the first thing we've got to address, is that stigma of shame. This is a disease. There's hope. It can be treated. It can be dealt with.
Can I ask where we need to do the most work? All right, you're at Fate, you're using education. You brought up the science aspect of it. People are starting to understand that. Stigma's not so much science as it is societal, cultural, right?
Yeah.
What do we need to work on the most? I know we need to work on both, but what is the most challenging thing right now, that people understanding the science or ending the stigma?
Well, there's a little of both. They're kind of intertwined, but we need to recognize it is a disease, okay? Secondly, we need to know how it works, and the scientists understand that. Third, we've got to know it's treatable. There are medications that can provide treatment, and we know today from surveys that 90% of the people who get effective science-based treatment report they get better if they get that treatment. Now, that's a big deal. Now, the cost to our society, we need education about that too. You know, I'm a business person. I hire employees. We have to have employees. But there are many industries today, from trucking to oil and gas, that are having difficulty finding employees because of addiction. It is ravaging our state. And I think education is the first thing we got to know. The science part of it, we just need to understand it. And we need to get treatment to those who need it. And so we've got to understand how big of a problem it is. We can't just lock up everybody that's sick. That's not going to solve the problem. It costs over $25,000 a year to lock somebody up. And that's minimum.
Denise, what do you think when you have your event on August 31st? The stigma, the science, the areas we need to go for in educating people. As a mother, what do you tell people we need to be doing now?
We need to be talking about it, and we need to be sharing. Just the other day, I was talking to somebody that was working in my yard, and I was telling him about the event. And he told me that he had a brother who was addicted to drugs, and he hasn't talked to him in years. I mean, within his own family. So the stigma is something that we as parents and family members and friends in the community really need to address and embrace those people and get them pointed in the right direction.
So from a societal aspect of it to a governmental aspect of it, Reggie, what do our public policy officials, elected representatives, need to be doing?
Well, they need to study the problem a little bit more. And that's why we founded FATE, Fighting Addiction Through Education. It's the E in that name that's most important. They need to understand it is a disease. They need to understand the cost. I think that, what I do for a living, I'm a lawyer. I try cases. I try to convince people one side is right. I wish I had a venue where I could put the evidence before our policymakers, but this is the number one problem our state has and the number one problem our nation has. I really believe the evidence shows that. It's affecting such a large percentage of the population, and very few people know it. I can give you a data point, just one data point. I grew up during the Vietnam War. We lost 58,000 American soldiers in that war over about a 20-year period of time. That's a little less than 3,000 people a year. Last year, we lost 109,000 Americans from overdoses. Now compare those numbers. And the Vietnam War, that's what ended that war, was the body count. I used to watch black and white TV.
Every night.
Every night.
Body
count. Americans were outraged that we would lose that many people. And indeed, they were correct. One life lost. Her sons lost. That's too many. But 109,000, that is insane. But for every death, it's like the tip of the proverbial iceberg. For every death, there are just innumerable people below that. families are shattered. My son's death rocked our entire family. And a couple of years after that, I lost another family member. And the body count continues to grow. And it's all unnecessary. This could be dealt with. We need to find ways to deal with it better. But you can't solve any problem until you know how it works. You know, when AIDS popped up, they originally didn't know how it was transmitted. They didn't know it was a virus. And once they figured out how it was transmitted, millions of lives have been saved, all through education and understanding the science of the problem, how it works. So that's the first thing we need to do. We need to get more insurance coverage for this. It is a disease. Can you imagine us telling somebody, if your kid had asthma, use more willpower. You don't need that asthma medication. Or your daughter has diabetes, and you tell them, use more willpower. You don't really need that medicine, that insulin. That would be barbaric. Well, there's medicine to treat this. There's other types of treatment. We need to get that treatment to those people. And our state and our city and our nation will be better off for it.
Sound like Jeff Dismus. Every time I say hello, it's like, we need more insurance coverage. So I totally understand it.
Jeff is a very smart guy.
He is. Well, a lot of what I've learned about this through the Terry Watch and the Jeff Dismus, we have right now, our family's watching Painkiller, the Netflix series on the cyclist, which brings up the cases that you did for the state of Oklahoma. A lot of people say, what became of that? How is that helping this particular problem right now?
Yeah, well, a lot of good came out of it. In 1996, Purdue Pharmaceutical was the first to push the concept that opioids are not addictive anymore. We have evidence that opioids were used over 5,000 years ago. It's one of the earliest medicines. It's always been addictive. It always will be addictive. Purdue kind of sold the concept that because we're making OxyContin and it's time released, that it's only addictive 1% of the time. That is demonstrably false. They've retracted that now. But they sold a bill of goods to America, and the sales of opioids went through the roof. Commencing in 96, we have graphs showing that. Well, guess what? The deaths and the overdoses, near deaths, went up in a parallel line. Commencing in the mid-2000s, the body count got so high that doctors and others began seeing that we're overprescribing. So guess what? Sales of opioids went back down. Deaths and overdoses went back down in a parallel line. So these lawsuits were filed by every state and almost every city and county in the United States of America. America made up its mind. This was a righteous lawsuit. And so the cases have, for the most part, settled. Our state officials, I believe, have the wisdom and the talent to decide how and where to spend that money, and it'll make a big difference. I will say this, when we settled the Purdue case, much of that money went to the creation of a new foundation based in Tulsa called the National Center for Wellness and Recovery. You can Google that. They have a website. That organization based in Tulsa, Oklahoma is going to change the world. It is led by some of the best scientific minds in Oklahoma. The president of Oklahoma State is leading that organization along with a gentleman named Don Kyle, who is an incredible scientist. And I think you'll see two things come out of that. I think eventually you'll see a non-addictive painkiller that will be discovered. They're working on it right now. And eventually I think they'll find the cure for addiction. That's complex. I hope both those things happen in my lifetime, but it doesn't matter. They need to happen, and I think they will happen. And we're giving free treatment for opioid use disorder right now, and so we're making a huge difference, and it's in its infancy. It's only been around a couple of years, but had we not brought the lawsuit, that wouldn't exist. And stay tuned. It's going to do amazing things.
Well, thank you for that. Denise, let me ask you as we close, this event is on Thursday, August 31st, and I'm wondering what sort of personal message you'd want to send to Oklahomans right now about the event, and where, as the mother of losing two children, that you want people to do this Thursday to remember, and in their actions moving forward.
So this Thursday, I encourage you to bring your children, your family members. It's going to be extremely impactful, very educational, and we just need the community to come together, and that's what we're trying to provide, our resources and other like-minded people to come together. You know, and to change the narrative and the stigma. I mean, my son even told me, "Mom, I'm not a bad kid, I'm just a sick kid." And, you know, for a parent to hear that and not be able to get the help that they need is just, you know, it's heartbreaking. And I don't want any other families to have to go through that, because just like Reggie said, I mean, there's help out there. And it is something that they can be cured of, and they can go on to live a happy, productive life. But we need to make those resources available. We need to get the word out. Families need to not be ashamed to get the help and to ask for it. And the more we have these events, the more it's public, then I think as a community, we're going to start making some big changes.
Denise, Reggie, thanks for what you do.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Hope people come out on Thursday and learn more about this. Education is everything. Hey, thanks for watching Hot Seat. See this again at news9.com/yourvotecounts to see the full interview with Reggie and Denise, and follow on my socials @Mitchell Talks.